Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
Hi, I'm Susan, and I'm a college counselor and have read applications for a small liberal arts college and 2 research universities. My twins are recent college graduates.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of 2 daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University. This week in the news, an article by Brennan, Barnard, and Rick Clark entitled College Search-A Point-Counterpoint. Question from a listener comes from a mom with twins, and she wants to know if and how her students should communicate their chronic medical condition in their application. And friends, we have a brand new interview, and it's Brian Hodges, a senior associate director at University of Illinois-Urbana-Champaign. It'll be a 3-parter. And we'll be talking about the University of Illinois. And college spotlights are back. Linda and I will be talking about Caltech reflections on my visit there in December. But for now, I'm here with Susan. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Mark. Good to hear from you.
Yeah. We had our traditional warm-up, so we're in the admission talk mode. It was great getting caught up with you.
Yeah, I loved hearing about, aside from listening to the podcast, I love our conversations about all your trips and your insights and in the news. You're just a font of information for all of us.
Well, I can't go anywhere without bumping into people who you know. So we could literally just talk about all the people that I meet on the road that you know. So it's interesting. But let's dive in today, and I'm going to share the tip today. But Susan's going to have some commentary on it. And we were talking earlier in our little pre-meeting. We both agree it's really important that students, let's talk the Common App, which is the main way students are applying. There's an opportunity to review your application. And you can see it in PDF form, which is how colleges see it. And please take advantage of that. Don't just say, oh, it's done and hit submit. This is particularly on my mind this week because I had a conversation with a family who came to realize that their student had a name of a college in the personal statement, which then went to everybody.
Oh, no.
And they wanted to know what they do about that, and that's actually something that happens. It happens way more than it should.
It does. And it's one of those careless errors that when we read an application, we understand, we understand the students are under a lot of pressure and careless errors happen, but not changing the name of the institution. And this would be in the college specific supplement, right? In the customized questions. That's a real challenging flaw because
that's really
every
bad.
college, those are the questions the college is asking. The ones
Sure.
they have total control over. And to be given the impression that the student is not customizing those in a heartfelt way is, it's sad. Would it be the reason why a college would deny admission to an otherwise competitive applicant? No, but let's just say it doesn't help the cause.
No, definitely does not help the cause. There are many, many reasons why you'd want to do it. And some of it could just be typos.
Yes.
Careless errors, misspellings, all those kinds of things. There's plenty
Absolutely.
of reasons to want to review it before you hit submit.
Well, and, as adults in our working life, whenever we write, whenever we create a written piece of work, when we're done with it, it's just like if you spent a lot of time on it, you just want to say goodbye to it. You want to push the submit button and off it goes. But how many of us have seen an email or a report where when we put it aside for a little bit and then went back to proofread it. We made significant changes, whether they were careless errors or content corrections that really, really needed to be made. And I was very aware of this when, I was working in a school and I wrote 50 to 70 letters of recommendation a year for our seniors. When I put a lot of effort and blood, sweat, and tears into those letters.
I know you did.
I really
did. You really did.
And when I was done, I wanted to be done and move on. There was an exhaustion that goes with creating anything, especially when it's a high stakes piece of work like a recommendation or an essay or an application. But I was, our administrative assistant would make me look at it, whether it was a couple hours later or the next day, just give it a quick read through. And man alive, I learned my lesson that I needed to do that and sometimes it was content that I didn't like the way that something came across, or I realized that something had gotten lost. But careless errors, one or two of them in an application, you can forgive a teenager a lot. There's always someone who's even been worse than that one that you're reading. But when there's a consistent pattern of errors or kind of thoughtless means of expression, that's the only impression of that student that you have to go on when you're reading an application. And that impression is impactful.
Yeah, most definitely. And our admission vernacular is a term that Julia often uses when we're talking about students that look like they are so exceptional in the student body. But a lot of times people are surprised when they are not admitted, and the term is standard strong. That student is standard strong. And I don't know if they used that back in your day, Susan. Does that term ring a bell or not for you?
It doesn't, but I like it.
Yeah, I think we know what it means right away. What do you? I know you know what that means, but how would you articulate to our listeners who may not know?
Well, some kids, they just come across as having done a lot of things very well, but perhaps not in a way that truly elevates the application above others. And standard is not a criticism. It's just kind of what the college tends to see, that there's a standard, but it's not the student's representation of themselves through the application isn't really lifting them above in a particular way.
Yeah, it reminds me of that term LMO, like many others. It's you can be exceptional in your school community, right, but in that broader community, especially at the most competitive, you don't pop because you're so many times you're up against kids that just their extracurriculars, the reach of those, Susan, you and I were talking about that earlier. In the most competitive pools, a lot of times the extracurriculars, they're not just school-based or
right,
just in your town. It's statewide or national. And I think this is one of the things that's befuddling to people when they don't understand why they didn't get in. And they're like, how could my grades be higher? My scores are amazing. I really know my teachers like me. I think my writing's pretty good. And it is. It's just that, they're in some of those, I call them the 1%ers. Other people call them highly rejectives. And those elite of the elite schools where you're competing against a very big world out there, some of the kids are just phenoms. They're just extraordinary. And, I don't say this to raise stress. I say it to reduce stress so that people won't beat themselves up and say, why did I not get in when I feel I do not know more what else I could have possibly done.
Right. And it's, this whole process is a bit damning of kids applying to college because standard strong is extraordinary in most applicant pools. Colleges want to see that impact and initiative getting a little bigger than, you think locally, but act globally is the old phrase. And I think that's what really lifts a student above that standard, that great standard that you were talking about.
Yeah, and our big number today is 500, and that is the increase for the 23-24 class in the Pell Grant. It's the biggest increase in decades, and that's coming on top of a $400 increase last year. So 900 over the last 2 years, bringing the Pell Grant now around 7,400. Now, it's short of the 13,000 that leaders in NCAN and other movements that are part of the double Pell movement are shooting for, but it's inching there, and Biden has a goal to see that achieved by 2029. May or may not happen, but this is really good for under-resourced kids who are trying to afford college, and it has officially gone through and is part of the $1.7 trillion bill that passed through Congress. So good news on Pell Grants and making college
very
affordable.
Good news. Very good. And remember, our listeners may not think of this automatically, but once a student is Pell eligible, that usually means they're eligible for a state grant.
Yes.
That Pell eligibility is tied to a lot of other sources of funding. So while some parents may say, well, it's peanuts,
Sure.
This is like a fraction of that college bill that I'm anticipating. But we need to remember that there are other sources of often public funding that are tied to Pell eligibility, and also that students are kind of in a recruited pool now, because colleges are they're kind of bragging a little bit about the percentage of their students who are Pell eligible, meaning here's evidence that we are doing, hard work to bring in students from the lowest bracket of income. So good news all around.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
So our article today, this is I have an interesting history with this article. I'm kind of excited to talk about it. I learned about this article on the Decemberfest trip that I was on, Susan. It was written December 8th, so literally it was published when I was on the trip. And Brennan and Rick. And so it's called College Search-A-Point-Counterpoint. And happy to have Susan here because Susan had a leadership role on College Search when she was at Bates. And so I'll get her comments in a sec. But I have to tell you some history. So regular listeners know that Brennan actually worked with Susan and I together. We go back. She was his associate director for 4 years. And Rick and Brennan, they're, really close. So you've got one, over Georgia Tech's office, and then Brennan on the counseling side. And they've published a few books and speak and a couple of podcasts together. They're just great friends. In fact, when I was in Decemberfest, Susan, Brennan was calling Rick all the time. Like,
really?
Cool. Yeah. He was always calling Rick. It was great.
Like brothers.
Yeah, no, they are. But here's the interesting thing. So I was with Brennan maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and he was like, do you know Rick Clark? And I'm like, no, I don't know. He's like, you need to meet Rick Clark. So he arranged for us to go down and have a lunch at Georgia Tech. And so I started asking him, like, how did this friendship emerge with Brennan? And then Rick says, we're really close, but we don't see everything eye to eye because I'm coming at it from a perspective of an admission director, and he's coming from the other side. And we've been great for each other, but sometimes we have some knockdown dragouts, and then he tells me one of them is over College Search. I'm a believer in it. Brennan is not. And then I talk to Brennan, and Brennan says the same thing. Rick and I don't see everything the same. We disagree in College Search. So then Brennan says to me, you need to read this article because we did a point counterpoint where I say why I'm not a fan and he says what he likes about it. So I just thought it's interesting. They each bring out some compelling points. And I think the way this is written is a fantastic way to learn because it's like you're observing a debate and you get to see, it makes you think through, the different views to see where you kind of come down. So Brennan's point is that there's already information overload out there right now. You get cluttered inboxes. Kids are just bombarded with information, both emails and direct mails from schools, and that schools oftentimes overreach. They lead kids on by sending them mail, making them think they're going to be a competitive candidate, and then they get their hopes up, and then they get rejected. Another point that Brennan brings out is that the College Board or the ACT is selling their name and their data, and And so they're kind of being taken advantage of. And Brandon feels really, strongly about it. In fact, we talked about it on the Decemberfest trip. He's like, if they're going to do that, then half of what they give should go to the students, because he's not comfortable with colleges almost exploiting. He finds it's exploitive to sell their name and they don't get any cut out of it. So that's in essence the argument that it's too much, it's overcrowding, it's misleading, it leads to misunderstanding of who's interested in you and who's not interested in you, and so that's in essence the argument Brennan brings up, and we'll link the article because I encourage you to read it yourself. I'm just doing a quick summary and probably not giving full justice to it. And then Rick's part is he admits it. Yes, it's a big business. Yes, there's powerful lobbies. I'm not saying that part isn't true. But he said, here's the other side. And this is what he said to me when I met him in Georgia Tech. He's like, we have kids on our campus who wouldn't be here if we didn't reach out to them. We can't possibly go to every single high school, or if we go to a fair, we're not going to reach everybody. We can't expect everybody to get on our website. And then the other point that Rick makes is that 91% of American high school students attend public schools where the average counselor caseload is 500 to 1. And so if you're in a smaller environment and you have someone like a Brennan, then you can build a list for people and you can say, hey, you don't need to, look at this school because it doesn't align with what you've told me in the questionnaire you're looking for. But if you're in one of these big under-resourced schools, how are you really going to find out about us if we don't have some massive way of communicating to the masses? And so College Search allows us to get on the radar of a lot of kids who wouldn't hear about us any other way. And so from his perspective, the pros outweigh the cons. So that, and I don't want to get too much in the detail of it. Do you think I missed anything in the article, Susan? I'll let you go where you want to go with it, Susan.
Well, I think your summary is great, Mark. I think for our listeners, let's back up a little bit. The actual program that we're referring to here is the College Board Student Search Service. So this is a service provided by the College Board to both colleges and students to help structure a process whereby colleges can identify students that they would like to recruit. Notice I didn't say that they would like to admit, but that they would like to publicize their institution to. And it's a way for students, as you said, to learn about colleges that might be interested in recruiting students like them, right? So in theory, I think this is very sound. This started in the early 1970s. It was all direct mail. So in a student's College Board account is the SDQ, the self-descriptive questionnaire. And that's where the students are filling out their side of the dating questionnaire.
So, Susan, did you recommend the kids complete it? What was your advice as a college counselor?
I never kind of viewed it, Mark, as a check the box or don't check the box. The real issue is what's in it for you. What's in it for the colleges and what's in it for you. So colleges are I'm going to talk about that in a second because I think it's important for our listeners to understand the college's motivation. For kids, yes, it's their way of throwing their name and some very rudimentary information into the public hat, so to speak, where they might get matched with colleges that are interested in recruiting students like you. So that's how I would phrase it to my students in high school is this isn't going to, you're not going to have any control over who contacts you. This is going to be throwing your hat into a very large pool. Now, what students think when I would say that to them is they think they're going to get matched with colleges they've heard of, or they think they're going to get matched with students, with colleges who are interested in recruiting them intentionally. And neither of those is true.
Right. And those are some of the concerns that Brennan has, is that it's misleading and it leads to misperceptions on the part of students of what your chances are. And we've all seen abuses. I mean, because it's hard. it's hard enough convincing people how hard certain schools are to get in, but then when they get peppered with recruitment mail, because a lot of these schools cast a very, very wide net. They buy 50,000 names, 100,000, 250,000 names, sometimes even more.
That's right.
And so I get the abuses, and it can make it harder for me sometimes because, kids will start telling me all these places they're getting mail from.
Right.
And I know that student does not line up with who those schools traditionally have taken. And so I get the danger of giving you false hope, because that's the concern sometimes. And, I never forget a parent saying to me, man, these schools recruiting my kid hard. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to admit it. I will encourage people to go back if they're really interested in this. Look at episode 28, which was entitled, Why Am I Getting All This Mail?
Oh, that's great.
We did a really deep dive on all the criteria that are used, whether it means you're likely to be admitted or not admitted. But this is a real practical question. Do you check the box or not check the box? And there's a quote from Rick in the article, and I think this makes a compelling point. He says, checking the box allows exposure and possibilities, invitations to visit campus, information about scholarship opportunities, fee waivers, hosted programs in your local area. All of this comes from opting in to receive the information. Let's be honest, in our culture, too many people get stuck in their own echo chambers. You can't think outside of the box until you realize that you're in a box. And so, I know that's the school side, but the school side is, this is one of the major ways people learn about us.
Right.
And, and I like to say to people, think of yourself as a college and you're a recruiter. And you need whatever, let's say you need 3,000 kids for your class. It could be any number. It could be 7,000, could be 500. So think about all the different ways that you're going to try to reach kids. You can't make it to every single high school. It's not possible. You don't have the manpower. And even if you did, we notice that people don't always show up. They have conflicts and they're at a game or they're at something. You can't think if you go to fairs in the area, you're going to reach everybody. You can't expect people to automatically all visit your school or even find your website. You can set up your virtual programming. You should do all that, but you can't expect everybody's going to sign up for your virtual day. So, you use a multi-pronged approach to recruiting.
No, I agree.
But you do need some way to reach the masses, because all of those are, those are expensive. That's an expensive model, hotel, airfare, rent-a-car, meals to fly in to, and not every school has the budget to do that extensively, and you don't reach everybody. So there has to be a way. I think what Brennan's doing is important, is he's raising the concerns of the abuses
right
that are out there. And I think that that's something that a lot of people don't think about. And because I said right to Brennan, or I said right to Rick, I said, I'm sorry, Brennan, I agree with Rick. I'm just going to tell you. And he said, well, I think he has some good points, but I'm also making a point.
Right.
And I think that needs to be made. And I think that's really true.
Okay, well, I think what we have to do, Mark, though, is look at how the colleges construct their searches, because that's where I don't think this is a good versus evil approach. The checking the box or not checking the box has to be rooted in an understanding of the larger process, which is why, I kind of explained the college, the student search process in terms of how it's designed. I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate Rick's perspective, having been both in admissions and on the school counseling side. So here's how a college designs a search. They are not sending their mailing or their email to every student in a geographic area who fits the criteria. So what we would do this, when I was at Bates, we would design a strategic campaign based on a geographic area and on certain priorities for recruiting that we might have in that area. So those priorities might be that we were interested in reaching out to students in a new area, new recruiting area, the Southwest, for example. Here I was in the state of Maine at a small liberal arts college, and we were trying to expand our geographic reach to parts of the country where we weren't that well known, but where we wanted to compete more ably with similar colleges that were drawing students from those areas. So you're right. We might go out and visit, get to know the school counselors, do a little geographic surveillance, but more likely we would use student search. We would meet with our representative at the college board, and we would submit our questionnaire. So the criteria that we were using only for that area. And we might say, we might have, lower the grade point average threshold a little bit because we wanted a little broader reach. We were test optional, of course, from, way back. So we would still put in a test score range because that's obviously we were dealing with the college board, but we might broaden that. We might target certain racial or ethnic groups in a particular area, and we might target students who were from less affluent families because of the type of student that we felt we might serve well and want to attract from that area. College board would then tell us, so they might say, okay, Southwest, those criteria, there are, I'm just making this up, 150,000 matches, right? We would then buy 15,000 names. We weren't going to buy the whole group. It was just too expensive. And plus we were probably doing a dozen different student search campaigns around the country. But we had this very targeted group. So what would happen is then they would search within that group, and they would give us like every fifth name or every sixth name, depending on the numbers, right? So this is where families freak out because they say, well, why did my neighbor's son get an email from Yale and I didn't? And so that's why is colleges aren't buying all the matches, all the names from an area. They're getting somewhat of a random sample, or they might be looking only for a recruitable population, maybe a particular major. They might only be searching for engineering majors or humanities majors, and that eliminates kids.
Yeah, let me say something on that, Susan, because I think you're really bringing out a really good point, which is how schools use search to target institutional priorities as a way of rounding out your class in demographics that are hard to get or you need more of. So I was having a conversation with Rick Shaw, who's over the Stanford office, about search. He actually did a presentation on search that I attended, and there was a small group of people. And so I afterward, I'm picking his brain, but he shared this in front of everybody in the search. Stanford gets so many students that are interested in computer science and engineering and business related majors, finance and things like that they don't use their search for any of that.
Right.
But they go after humanities and because they don't get as many applications as they'd want there. So that's an example of a school saying, why would we waste money buying names when we're already deluged in this area? Let's go after, this over here.
That's a great example.
Yeah. And so, that's kind of the nice part about it is there's a lot of ways you can slice and dice who you go after. And then you do a campaign and you do a funnel. Now, one thing that I've noticed that's different from talking to a lot of admissions professionals, and some of this may be budget, a lot of people are moving more to email and less to direct mail.
Yes.
And I'm sure some of that is budget, but I also know that same session, he shared their response rates. And I was in there with a lot of other admissions people from different schools, and they were just flabbergasted at how high the response rate is because there's a correlation with the brand name, right?
Of course.
And so the point is, like, some of the other schools are pushing back, like, hey, this is expensive to buy the names, then 2, to come up with the marketing campaign, then to produce the materials, then to pay for postage. And so recent years, there's been, obviously email is a lot more cost effective.
That's right.
Yeah. So it seems like, at least from people I'm talking to, there's been more email. I mean, look, the direct mail's still out there. There's plenty of people listening. Like, I would never know by checking my mailbox.
Well, and this is a good reason why kids should begin a unique email address early in high school and start using it. I mean, I think the point is kids have to separate their school and personal email from their college email. And I think it's really good advice. And I used to say this at our school is, start at the PSAT with a unique email that will only be receiving and then continue with that email when you hit the application process, Mark, because as you know, colleges, especially those that track demonstrated interest, look at the longevity and the types of contacts that a student has had with them over the years. And they tend to favor students who have had a long and sustained engagement with them.
Yes.
And if you suddenly, when you apply, you change your email, you're cutting off a lot of data that the college might actually be interested in looking at when you apply. In business, there's a difference between a warm and a cold prospect. A warm prospect is someone who's kind of paying attention to the process and is getting close to buying the product, right?
And sometimes I know that stuff is linked to IP addresses, so they can sometimes link it to the computer that you're on through technology. Because sometimes people will ask me, what if I'm on a different computer, if I'm on my mom's computer versus
my
that?
understanding, at least the colleges that I've read for, are linking to email address. Because, a school that I read for at one time, when I read the application, I could see when the student had been emailed by the university and whether or not they'd opened it. I didn't care that much about.
It's schools that are doing this. I know we've talked about this before, but I really feel at some point we have to do more of a deeper dive on this. A really good person or company to interview would be human capital. They are doing high level stuff for people. I mean, the predictive modeling,
right? Right.
I mean, the predictive modeling where they come back and say 13% chance of yielding this
yes.
kid and 76% chance
of yielding this kid.
Oh yeah, and literally putting thousands of variables into the equation. And it's hard when you talk about this because not everybody does all this, but this is out there and it's more widespread, I think, than people think.
That's
it's not
right.
the kind of thing a college is going to talk to you about because the secret sauce, right? Nobody wants to reveal the secret sauce and think you're gaming the system back.
That's right.
But,
and I have no objection to the business model. I just think when families don't understand it, even at a very rudimentary level, then it's introducing a level of inequity that I don't appreciate. I don't disapprove of the College Board Student Search Service when a college uses it in a highly targeted way to identify students, particularly underserved students who might not otherwise know the brand of the college or might not see themselves as being a good fit.
But I would go further than that, Susan, because even if you go outside of underserved, I mean, we know this, that I bet you and I could make an offer to most kids and say, here's a pad of paper. We'll give you $10,000 if you can write 200 college names down, and they probably couldn't do it. I use this when I'm talking to my students to make the point of just because you haven't heard of a school, I don't want you to think it's not any good.
Yes.
That's a fraction of the schools out there. So, there's so many schools that are trying to get some type of name recognition to at least be heard of. If I haven't heard of me, then there's no way you'll even consider me. And even outside of underserved populations,
That's right.
There's still that small number of names, even if it's 100, 150. Well, guess what? You'll see different stats out there. I use the more conservative 2,400 four-year accredited bachelor granting institutions that, can accept federal aid, but, you can go up into the 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 if we want to count for-profits and two-year programs. So there's a big number of schools out there, and most people have only heard of a fraction of them.
No, you're right.
And
this is where, big-time sports wins certain universities. It's really a bizarre and somewhat irrational advantage.
Well, Rick talks about it in the article. He said he brings up sports as, can you imagine what it would cost to pay for that kind of marketing? Like,
I know.
Hours and hours and hours on national TV, not to mention the commercials and the lead up. And so, I mean, it's a challenge, especially for unheralded names that no one has heard of, and they're trying to penetrate and get themselves out there.
I agree. And, some families say my student would, my son or daughter wouldn't have looked at, Cornell College in Iowa if they hadn't sent me 100 pieces of direct mail.
And it can be effective. Like, I mean, I see with my students when they start to get a lot of pieces, it can make them think, maybe I need to take a look at this place. They seem to have some interest in me.
But can't it also cheapen a college's brand? I know I've had some students who say, there's this feeling of desperation when I get an email every 3 days, or, the incentives. Sometimes colleges incentivize the contact, and it starts kind of escalating. Now they have a fee waiver. Now they have, a free notepad, or fill out this questionnaire and you'll get a T-shirt. Or, colleges have moved into big business, and they're hungry in some cases. What bothers me, Mark, is when some colleges who have such extraordinary national and international brands continue to use the student search service in a way that is not discriminating enough.
No, that's my pet peeve. I think we agree.
This is where we agree, and we agree with Brennan. I don't have such a damning perspective that Brennan has, because I think as counselors we have to teach kids in a way how to control this, and it's a good consumer lesson for the future, right? But when the University of Chicago blankets, hundreds of thousands of kids, many of whose credentials to you and me are far below what a university would probably entertain as a competitive student. I don't understand the rationale for that. The phenomenon is called recruit to reject, and that's a buzz phrase that came into being some years ago. And in some way, to us, it feels pretty transparent that these are colleges, but Yale, Brown, really? Harvard? I don't think they need to keep recruiting unqualified students.
No, I agree. Now, their argument would be they're kids who got an 1150 on a test because they didn't know anything about the pacing and the timing. And the GPA looked good, and that person will potentially soar into a range that we'd be comfortable with. That would be their argument, and so we want to cast a wide net. I often think it does more harm than good in those situations, and I feel very strongly the brand names are the brand names. They have a greater responsibility.
I agree.
And a lot of times they don't. And sometimes the other thing I have a big problem is with, and I can't say this on the air, but I'll say it off the air, because somebody you and I know very well, when we were working together, as big a brand name as there is in the industry, the wording of what they were sending this student, anybody would look at that and think that I'm going to get admitted here.
Yep, we're interested in recruiting students like you.
Oh, it was even stronger. It was really bad. And that,
you are a good candidate.
Yeah. So certainly that's an abuse of it. But it's an important question, because do you check a box and not check a box? And I think we do have to remember that the average person does not have you or me or Brennan or Julia or somebody guiding them through the process to help them filter this. They're just in a big public school. They've never heard of anything. And this may be a way that they learn about a school that could be a good match.
Well, and I went in and preparing for this talk, Mark, I went in and actually filled out the student descriptive questionnaire.
You're so diligent, Susan.
Well, I wanted to see what it looked like in this in a student's College Board account.
Yeah.
And There isn't anything there that helped me understand how the information would be used. And what I would have liked to have seen were the pluses and the minuses. Really explaining to a student what good purposes might be behind participating in the Student Search Service versus some of the downside, and what to do if it becomes a detrimental experience for them. I mean, the thing that families need to know is that the novelty of this wears off really fast, and that the assault of information becomes unmanageable for a student. The first thing I would say to families is create a dedicated email. The second is, that old phrase, garbage in, garbage out. If you fill out your self-descriptive questionnaire in a way that is not truly representative of yourself, or that is super general, then you're opening yourself up to a lot of just junk mail. Whereas if you're honest and specific, particularly about your credentials and what you want to study, and the other, it's a lot of questions. Get really down and dirty with that questionnaire so that you only get picked up in a way by colleges that are truly looking to match with students like you. And you know what? If you're getting what I would consider junk mail from colleges that you would never consider, unsubscribe really quickly, because when I'm on a bunch of parent listservs and Facebook groups, and the ranting and the railing against colleges for all this assault of information, you only have yourself to blame. Don't blame the colleges. You, as soon as a college, it doesn't appeal to you, unsubscribe. Start, if you're a parent, help your child understand how to manage that volume. Take responsibility for getting off the mailing lists of colleges that don't interest you. Own the process. Don't let it own you. And then it'll work to your advantage.
Yeah, and the other thing I try to tell families, when a brand name sends you something, you want to think it's because they want you. And so, and when they may, but they're just casting a wide net. And so one thing I always like to remind people is look at all the information they don't have about you.
Ah, good point.
Think about all they don't have about you. Like, yeah, even if, you listed a self-reported GPA, they haven't seen your curriculum, your courses, your grade trends, haven't seen any of your writing.
Type of school you go to.
Type of school you go to, extracurriculars. You haven't seen recommendations, counselor recs, teacher recs, school rec. There's so much they haven't seen that factors into who they admit. So just temper your interpretation that they really want me by realizing just how much they don't have about you. Yeah,
right, well,
sure.
Think about that dating questionnaire.
Yes, yeah.
How much when you actually sit down with that person, for your first, I'm not talking to kids here because I doubt they're using, but, when you sit down with that person and you realize, wow, not a fit, not a match. The person exaggerated this or that, or they excluded this or that. That's why I'm saying really, if you're filling out the SDQ, be really honest and specific, but bear in mind that they're getting only a fraction of the information that they're going to use. And you may get ruled out so quickly by those colleges, and, shame on them if it is a recruit to reject situation. But, there is a lot of it out there. So, this is why I remember when the application numbers started skyrocketing when I was still working in my school, and the most selective colleges that used to visit us regularly, because we were a feeder school for them, sent them applications they loved, students they loved. It was a good fit all around. They would say to me, I hope you understand, but we're just simply not going to be visiting your school anymore because we're leading kids on. And they're going to have to stand on the strength of their application like everybody else. And we love and respect your school. We're still going to give them, a fair review, but to be here sitting with your strong students and seeing how great they are and knowing that we're basically encouraging their interest and they're very unlikely to get in. they're going to stop. And that's why a lot of very selective schools stopped school visits, except perhaps in areas where kids were under-recruited and they were looking to increase certain
the hardest
populations.
demographics for them to
Yes.
get. The hardest demographics, whether they do the College Horizons or whatever, the
Exactly.
really hardest ones to get. And then they'll go set at a Marriott and maybe in a group and then blast things out to counselors, and then you can come to some big group session and
Yep.
and they'll get the people. So it's more
Well,
efficient.
then they can hold you at arm's length, but that's a lot harder when you're sitting at a school, in a room with a group of kids who, and I was there as an admissions person, and when I worked for Bates and I recruited in the state of Connecticut, which was a feeder state for us. And as, over the 12 years I was there, that we became much, much more selective. The applicant pool doubled, then tripled. And this was a long time ago, but we were test optional. No one else was, except for a tiny handful of schools that had seen the light.
like Bowdoin, main competitor Bowdoin there.
So to speak. Well, but let's not go there. But Bowdoin didn't do it for the same reasons. But thank goodness they did, and they were a pioneer, and I will respect them forever for it. But it was just starting. But it was very hard to sit with a group of kids, and that's why, as a counselor, a college admission counselor, I saw my role as teaching kids about the college admission process as much as promoting my own school. Because I knew maybe a third of them would get in, and then it was less than that, and then it was less than that. And
well, that's what the best admissions people do, I find. They don't see themselves as salespeople. They see themselves more as counselors helping kids, whether that means they end up at my destination or not. And those are the best ones.
I agree with you a little bit, not a lot.
Yeah.
I saw a lot change as college admissions turned from counseling to marketing. Mark, it was an enormous difference in my years at our school together, especially as we crossed into 2008. Even though the economics were bad, suddenly college admissions was taking off. And I don't know, it was an interesting transition in the profession as colleges continued to recruit avidly, but were admitting many fewer students here. And for parents, those of you who are listening, don't put a lot of stock in the student search service. Like Mark said, view it as an opportunity to learn about some really great schools that might not be household names to you. Understand that these schools did match with your student on some level, and take the time to look a little deeper and not be dismissive of schools that you're unfamiliar with. I mean, we all have our, little familiarity, like Mark said, of if we follow, D1 basketball, we know a subset of colleges in the country. If we follow other things, we have different subsets. I was talking to a family in another country the other day, and I found this very, very interesting, that I was recommending a couple of universities that are polytechnic institutes, Cal Poly, Rensselaer Polytechnic, Worcester Polytech, really superb schools and great fit for their child. And the mom said to me, I have to stop you here because I want to give you a little cultural feedback that in my country, the word polytechnic means trade school.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what about MIT, Caltech, Georgia Tech? And they're like, oh, no, those are institutes of technology. It's the word, of course, you and I know the word poly means many.
Right.
So many technologies somehow in their culture meant trade school, where Institute of Technology meant university.
Well, you're mentioning one reason why I love what we do is because we learn from our students and our families, and we never stop learning. They're always teaching us something. You never arrive in this business. There's always something to know.
I agree. But I guess,
Susan, we need to wrap this up because it's been a while. But this has been a great conversation. I really kind of liked the terrain we've covered, and to be continued.
You bet. It's always unraveling a lot of complicated stuff, but I love knowing that the families that are listening have some good takeaway from our conversations.
Thank you. We'll see you next month.
Bye-bye.
Friends, when editing this episode, I thought of a few things I didn't say. Now, you know I'm pro-student search if you listen to this discussion, but there's some caveats, of course, and there are a couple things about search that grind my gears. And here they are. I've had more than one student tell me that even when they click unsubscribe, they still keep getting their email bombarded from the same school. And secondly, while unsubscribing is a great idea, and Susan talked about that you should definitely do it, I've also had more than a few students say that there's so many schools bombarding me with information that unsubscribing should not have to be a part-time job for me. I really want to thank Rick and Brennan for doing a point-counterpoint, and I really hope that they'll write more articles like this with the college side versus the counselor side to hot topics. Because for one, it's desperately needed, and two, it's great content for our podcast.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Friends, we got a question from a listener that I felt Susan would be a much better person than me because of her experience in this particular area to answer. So I asked if she would partner with Lisa and answer our question for our week. And thankfully, she obliged. I thought the discussion was rich and robust, so we're dividing it up into part 1 this week and part 2 next week. And I want to thank Susan for being so generous with her time to do 2 segments for us this week in our podcast.
Hi, everyone. I am really happy here today to do our question from a listener segment with one of my favorite people, Susan Tree, who is our brilliant co-host once a month, and she's graciously agreed to answer this question, which comes from a listener. How are you doing, Susan?
I'm doing great, Lisa. It's such a nice treat to be here with you.
Yes. Well, hopefully you and I won't get in the same kind of fights that Mark and I do. I don't think it's going to happen.
Oh, my goodness.
We've never done it before, so we don't know.
That's right. Just us girls today.
Just us girls today. So here's the question. And this is someone who writes in and she says, "Hi, I just found your podcast and I've been binge listening. I have 2 high school seniors looking at colleges. I just listened to your episode about students with ADHD and it brought up a question. I've been wondering about it. Both of my kids have serious chronic illnesses / physical disabilities. Despite this, they've done amazingly well in school and on test scores. I would really like to know how college admissions counselors view applicants with disabilities. Will they be super impressed about how well my kids have done despite their obstacles? Or are they going to be more concerned about the possible cost of support? I don't know if my kids should play at how much they have overcome in their personal statement, or if this will be viewed as a sob story. Would really love some honest feedback." So, Susan, we know you're up for honest feedback. So, what kind of pearls of wisdom can you give us all on this topic?
Well, I love this question, and I was about to say this mom's question, but we actually don't know if it's a mom.
I think it's a mom. It's a mom.
Okay. I just give her a big round of applause, first of all, because she's asking a hard question, but she's also putting her cards on the table and being very honest about what their circumstances are and how they want to approach it with integrity. And can't ask for much more than that, really,
No,
as a family starts to look at the application process. She wants what's best for her 2 children. Maybe they're twins, maybe they're not. But interestingly, 5 or 6 years ago, I was in her shoes with two seniors looking at colleges. A boy and girl twins, and both of them had accommodations in high school, but had done well and were looking forward to going to college. And in my work at on the secondary level as a college counselor, I worked with many students who had a variety of sometimes they were considered disabilities because they had diagnoses, and sometimes they were just limitations. They were differences. But I did have lots of students under, my wing who had diagnosed issues for which they received various accommodations, either on testing or in school in general. Now that I'm back on the college side and reading applications for the last few years, I'm getting to see kind of a wide range of how applicants are presenting themselves. And this is to, pretty highly selective admissions situation where I'm reading now. And just as I applaud this mother, I applaud all the kids out there who are writing their applications from the heart and are clearly recognizing whatever it is that they're dealing with, whether it's a mental health issue or a physical disability or a learning disability, where they're basically saying, this is me. This is who I am, and this is part of my story, and my story would be incomplete if I were not to talk about this. That said, there are lots of ways that kids address it, and I think that's what this mom is hoping to get a little bit of feedback on. They're still, as I'm sure you know, being, a clinical psychologist, there are a lot of families that are fearful of the kind of ingrained discrimination against lots of people in this process.
Yes, anyone who's in any way different, right?
And the irony is that differences are what distinguish applicants. Mm-hmm. Differences are the spice of life. Variety is the spice of life. And no college that I've ever known has wanted a first year class filled with kids who think alike, write alike, have the same interests. They actually are looking for a richness of variety. The professors want it in the classroom because it enlivens everyone's experience. And college campuses that are residential in nature are trying to mimic society in a way. Not all of them do a very good job of that, but they're mimicking the diversity that kids are going to be dealing with forever, right? Whatever they do, and learning to get along with people, learning to work together, to solve problems together, to not have always everything go their way. Mm-hmm. So differences can be extremely I was going to say marketable, and then I stopped myself because it sounds it like cheapens it. But it's too many applicants sanitize their applications, and I'm very fond of that word because I think it's dramatic. But kids sometimes try, and I think probably with the help of their parents, to present an immaculate story, an immaculate application. No chinks in this armor of these kids, and it isn't believable.
Right.
It isn't on the other side. Teenagers are works in progress, and that's, they're beautiful. Their beauty is in those chinks, and we hope they're not finished products.
No,
right? When they're
and college
70, heaven forbid. Yeah. So how a student writes an application in a way that brings themselves to life, that takes that standard form, whether it's the Common or the Coalition app or the university's own application, and they take that standard skeleton of a form and they basically, build it. They build themselves from that starting place. And I have heard this term about, wow, this is a sanitized application. A lot in especially since the pandemic, when a lot of kids wanted to say, hey, well, I'm still awesome. And even though these circumstances are oppressive and I'm dealing with all this stuff, look at me, look at me triumph. And, you can't triumph, you can't overcome unless you're looking kind of up from the bottom.
Right. You haven't shown that you've overcome a challenge because you're just saying, my daughter is on LinkedIn. She's looking for internships, and I'll see the posts of her classmates, and it's always like, I just got promoted to this, and I just got promoted to that. And I was joking, I'm just here again to brag about myself. They're so sanitized, and they look so perfect. No one says, like, you know what? I totally messed up that interview I just did. It went really badly. I almost think something like that. You can't do that in a professional situation, but it would be refreshing on an interpersonal level.
That's absolutely true. Because, college, the experience of college is all about experimenting and taking risks and stumbling, and not just picking yourself up in secrecy, so no one knows. It's actually about learning to reach out and get help, support from your friends, support from your faculty members. The experience of kids with disabilities and medical conditions is that they have another layer of research when they're looking at colleges that goes a little bit beyond, because they may have special needs. I mean, everyone has special needs, right?
Sure.
But kids with medical and physical and learning disabilities have to consider what their experience on that college campus will look like, and what they will need in order to be their most empowered and, growthful self, just like every teenager. But they may need wheelchair accessibility. They may need medical, on-site medical care. They may need sign language interpreter or large print. They're all varieties of accommodations that have very little to do with the actual intellectual academic capability of the student. That may be equal, if not superior, but they may need these different accommodations in order to have a fully successful learning experience. And this mom, the first thing I thought of when I read her question is, if this is a critical piece of your child's narrative, of your children's narrative, and it's who they are, then your first priority should be finding colleges that are going to let them be their very best selves.
Right.
And that depends on the nature of the challenge that they're facing. When I was at working full-time in liberal arts admissions quite a few years ago, I became friendly with a student who had cystic fibrosis, and very bright, really a wonderful young woman, but she had extraordinary medical needs, and she needed to have a health center on campus where she could at times be in residence when she was in her most fragile self. And then, with care, then she would bounce back and be able to go back to the dorm. But they had to have that. It wasn't a case of, well, we have a health center, but you don't spend the night here. If you need that kind of care, you have to go to a hospital. And she didn't want that. She needed, a couple days here and there or whatever. So there, that's just one example. We all have other examples of kids who are allowed to have extended time on exams or test alone because they read aloud to themselves in order to cue their auditory learning, their auditory understanding along with their visual understanding. They're kids that have needs that are greater than that, where they may have to have an aid because of physical limitations. My son went to college with a fellow with cerebral palsy who was very limited physically, and he had a full-time, the joke was it was his bodyguard, but it wasn't. It was, just someone who was filling in for him physically, but very smart, very capable young man who did amazing things and enriched everybody's experience. So there's some things obviously that would never make sense to push under the carpet during the application process, right?
Mm-hmm.
That would make no sense at all, because and I'll say this right to this mom. I'll say, Mom, it's not just will they deliver your kids with the accommodations that they deserve, but what will their attitude be toward your kids? Will they be, celebrated? Will they be normalized? That's as important as getting the extended time or the special diet, for your child who has celiac or Crohn's disease.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up such an interesting point, because she's in this question explicitly worried about how admissions counselors will view these kids. But really what we should be thinking about is, how is the college as a whole going to serve these kids' needs? And, how accepting and helpful is the college going to be? And are they going to, do it with a smile on their face? Or are they going to be all grumpy about it? So I think that's it's a different way of turning this narrative around for this family, because, it sounds like these kids are amazing. And if some college thinks that they're going to be too much of a bother, then I don't think we want them to go there. Right. So, I think that being honest in this sense would be really helpful for this family.
Well, and something to look out for, and I was very aware of this when I was working at my school, and I would kind of rehearse with my students the kinds of questions they could ask when they went on a campus visit or they were emailing an admission counselor. And there are some universities and colleges that have full-blown disability programs, where it's really, really clear that they are mission-driven with this particular program to serve these certain kinds of students. That's explicit and kind of different. But if you're looking at a college where there's a learning center or a student support center, where's the word disability? Because I think there can be a pretty big difference. Not always, but you've got to, in your research as parents and as applicants, if you ask the question, I have accommodations in high school and I would like to make sure that those are in place, when I go to college, is the response, oh, well, we have a great writing center and all students are welcome to come in and use the writing tutors or whatever? Or do they respond by saying, here are the instructions for how to make sure your documentation is in place before you come for your first year orientation? We want to have everything reviewed, go over it with you, and talk you through what you're going to be doing during orientation to work with your professors one-on-one about how they are going to be supporting you. So there's a big difference between saying, oh, well, all students get support here in writing.
Right.
You can just drop in anytime and we'll read your paper. But for a student who is up front saying, I have accommodations, and I want to know how to whatever, kids often don't know. They'll often just say, where do I turn this in? But does the school immediately understand that what their responsibility then is to help this student be empowered in their experience from day one? Right. And the mistake I see some parents making, and actually, this conversation can happen with the dean's office or their learning support center. If you ask admissions, it's very likely that they're going to refer you over anyway.
Right.
So, feel free, mom, dad, kids, pick up the phone, call the, whatever they call it, learning support, disability, but talk to the people, not to the salespeople in admissions where they're going to feel everybody here can be successful.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, because one thing that has impressed me is how differently colleges support students and in areas of, physical disabilities or learning differences or what have you. And some colleges have amazing resources and some don't have any. And they're not who you would think they would be, right? So you might say, well, that big state school isn't going to help me at all. But then look at Arizona. Like, they have an amazing program, so
right.
You really have to do your research on that. They're not all created equal. And some schools don't prioritize it as something that's important to them. So
Exactly. I truthfully, and of course it depends on the disability or the medical condition. The most selective schools in the country, the highly rejective colleges, it's not that they're prejudiced toward people who learn differently or who have different, medical needs or anything, but the expectations in the application process are, there just doesn't seem to be a lot of room. Like if you got C's because you have, dyslexia, or, you have straight A's, and then there are those 2 C's in, because you have a math disability or whatever, don't expect any sympathy, meaning you can't explain away, especially in the most highly competitive admissions situations, just because you have a documented disability doesn't mean they're going to overlook sub-average, below average achievement for them. And I think that's a mistake that some parents have. So if you as a student have some ups and downs in your academic record while you were figuring out your learning needs and how to be your most successful self, whatever that means for you, then you should write about it. You should write about what you were dealing with, what you learned about yourself. What power did you tap into? Was it a superpower of your own that you just learned to do something brand new? Or you finally maybe got over yourself and went and got some help. Maybe in high school,
right.
You kind of didn't ever have to do that, and it was hard on your ego to do that. But by golly, when you finally did, your dyscalculia or whatever your disability was, started becoming more manageable. But they're not going to let, a highly selective school will your grades are what your grades are.
Right. And they don't give you any, they're looking for reasons to reject you. And that's a real easy one. You got to see, bye,
Right.
So.
But if you've got some growth and they can see trajectory, often parents will say to me, oh, 1B in 9th grade, is that the kiss of death? And no, of course it's not. But what came after 9th grade?
Right.
The kids who stop a foreign language prematurely, that's also a really big disadvantage. Or kids who never took a foreign language because of maybe a reading disability or a language-based learning disability. Maybe your high school let you out of it, but a lot of colleges aren't going to. They're still going to hold you up to that. We expect 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, I think those are all great points. And I think your point about showing a positive trajectory of growth in whatever essays that you write about your situation. So I had a client this year and she had narcolepsy and she kept falling asleep in class. And she's smart as a whip, I tell you. And finally, she got tested and they realized what was going on. She started taking medications and started getting all A's in class. But that wasn't until her junior year, right? So her GPA did not reflect her academic ability in any way, shape, or form. But, so we had to talk about that in her essay. And so far she's done very well. She's still waiting on a few schools, but she's done very well in the admissions process.
Oh, that's great.
So, but yeah, things like that. And it's to your point about so the highly rejective. So Mark and I spent an afternoon at Duke last year, and we just sat there and we just talked to people, and it was fabulous. But the thing that kids complained about Duke the most is that they were not helpful to people who had physical disabilities. So one student told me of a friend of hers like broke her leg and could only walk like, I don't know, X amount of steps on it per day. And so she asked to have her dorm room moved closer to campus temporarily because that would reduce the number of steps that she would. And they said no. Things like that, just then that was that was a constant theme in these conversations that we had with students. So, it's definitely important to ask the questions. And I would say, if you have some time, if you're really seriously thinking of that school and you can hang out where all the students are hanging out and ask them about it, that's when you're going to get the real story, I think.
That's incredible. And what you can do too is you can ask to be connected to a student who possibly has the same
that's a great idea
disability that you have. Admissions often won't be the office to do that, but the student services center, and they'll never just give you a list of names. They'll contact their student and say, I have this inquiry from a prospective family. Would you be willing to talk with them? Could I share your information with them? But that those kids generally are thrilled to talk to prospective families and share their experience and give you an honest kind of accounting of what it's been like for them.
Friends, hopefully you're enjoying this discussion with Lisa and Susan. They will finish up the final part next week. Hope you'll join us.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, really excited about a whole brand new interview with Brian Hodges, the Senior Associate Director at the University of Illinois-Urbana-Champaign. And I asked Lisa if she could join us because she lived in Illinois for 30 years and her husband, Alan's also a graduate of UIUC. So we just really go into depth on understanding the University of Illinois-Urbana-Champaign. It's over an hour interview, and we're dividing it into 3 parts. This is part 1 of 3. Hope you enjoy. Okay, friends, we're in for a treat today. I'm here with 2 esteemed guests. Well, one's not a guest. One's very familiar to you, Dr. Lisa Ruff, and we're here with Brian Hodges from UIUC. How are you, Brian and Lisa?
Doing great. Looking forward to our conversation.
So, Lisa, I intentionally wanted you to join us because you've got a special connection to the University of Illinois-Urbana-Champaign. Why don't you share that with our listeners?
Well, as many of you know, I have lived in Illinois from 1998 to 2021. Just have a lot of connections with the state and with University of Illinois-Urbana-Champaign. So many of my daughter's best friends are there right now, and they're having the time of their lives. And then my husband also graduated like way, way long ago because he's so old, with a chemical engineering degree. So that is our connection. And I'm really excited to be here with Brian and you today, Mark.
Great. Thanks. So, Brian, why don't you just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background, anything at all in your history that you think our listeners would be interested in.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on this platform. Again, my name is Brian Hodges. I'm the Senior Associate Director for Recruitment and Outreach and Office of Undergraduate Admissions at University of Illinois-Urbana-Champaign. I have been in higher education about 17 years or so. I actually am a graduate from the University of Illinois-Urbana-Champaign. You won't be able to tell this, but you can tell by my size. I played football at the University of Illinois. I graduated the year we actually won the Big Ten championship in 2001. So
was that because of you?
I will say it's because of me, but I mean, we had a quarterback that was pretty great and some receivers and other people that were way above me. But yeah, sure. It was because of me. I was definitely a cog in the wheel, that's what I say. I am originally from Country Club Hills, as a south suburb of Chicago. I would consider myself a first generation student, and I didn't know I was a first generation student until I started in this role in undergrad admissions, and understanding the definitions and what that meant and all things that I didn't know about college. I found out when I became an admissions counselor. So I was an admissions counselor at the University of Illinois in Springfield, a small public institution part of the University of Illinois system. I was an admissions counselor there. I was a Chicago regional rep, where I actually lived in the Chicagoland area and recruited in that area. for a long period of time until an opportunity came available to come back to my alma mater and work in the admissions office. And I have been with the University of Illinois-Urbana-Champaign for, this is 5 years now. 5 years. Started off as assistant director and had the opportunity to be in my current role now. So very happy to be wearing the orange and blue. Very happy to help students hopefully find their path on our campus. And I've been doing this. And when I first started, they told you in admissions you're either going to be here for 3 years or 30. I am definitely on the 30 track.
Yeah, and Andy Borst, who I know is your direct report, speaks very, very highly of you, and he says, "Grab Brian now because he's on his way to being the VP of enrollment. It's it's just a matter of time, so you better get him now." So with his strong recommendation, we're happy to have you today, Brian.
Oh, wow, I appreciate that. He's trying to kick me out the door too soon. Things that they want to do.
So our topic today is simple. It's just understanding UIUC. And I'm going to call it UIUC because every time I try to say University of Illinois-Urbana-Champaign, I always flub it for some reason. So UIUC is easier for me. So that's our topic today. And it's a very popular school. And it's a flagship school for the state of Illinois. And a lot of our listeners are interested in it. So that's what we're going to cover today.
Great. So, Brian, can you give us the elevator pitch for UIUC? Like, if you had 3 to 5 minutes to explain the essence of the school, what would you say?
Okay. Well, I would say University of Illinois-Urbana-Champaign is the flagship institution of the state. We sit right in the heart of Illinois. We're about, say, 2 hours south of Chicago. We're about maybe 2.5 hours east of St. Louis, maybe about an hour and 30 minutes west of Indianapolis. So we're in a hub of a lot of different places within the Midwest. But Illinois is known for a variety of things. And one of the top-notch things about Illinois is the academics. We do have about 150 different programs. They are housed in 11 different academic units. Obviously, the people that know about Illinois, they know about the Grainger College of Engineering. They know about the Gies College of Business. They know about our STEM fields. But the majority of our programs are liberal arts and science. We're a liberal arts and science institution. We have our College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, which houses more than half of our different programs. We have our Applied Health Sciences College. We have a fine Applied Arts College, College of Media, College of Education. One unit I will highlight will be our Division of General Studies. It is a place for a lot of students that might not know exactly what they want to do as far as a major is concerned. Even if they come in to the institution with a program, which most students have to because you are applying directly to a program, the advisors within the Division of General Studies do a fantastic job of kind of helping students find their path, whether it's a field within the college they're in or they want to what we call intercollegiately transfer to another college. We kind of help them find their path. And the academics there is fantastic. They're going to find a career. And one way they help them find a career is through the experiential learning. And that encompasses a variety of things from internships to research opportunities to job shadowing. It helps students find their path in their field, or it may also help them find out that they don't want to do the things in that particular field. And I say that because about 50% of our students change their major once they come to Illinois. And that's why Division of General Studies is a fantastic resource for those students to kind of find their path. Now, at Illinois, the academic part is fantastic, but there's a social education that students get to. So they get the academic education and they get a social education. And that kind of comes through our registered student organizations. They range from political to social to cultural to volunteer to sport to academic to pretty much anything that a student can think of. And it kind of supplements what they learn in the academic realm and kind of prepares them for what the real world will be like and how they have to work with people that might not look like them, or might come from a different area as them, but they're interested in something similar, or they might be interested in something else, but they want to find a path towards creating something better. And those social education, those resources and those student organizations is a great way for those students to kind of get that social education. And be totally honest with you, most students remember what happens socially in the academic realm when it comes to higher education. So it's a great place for that learning that is available to students. I can go on and on about different programs, but I will say some of our more popular student organizations help students find their path. We used to have one that was called the Squirrel Watching Club. Now, I know most institutions especially Big Ten institutions, especially in the Midwest. They have a lot of
Oh, yeah, I
squirrels.
see that.
Yes, like Illinois squirrels might have a hue of orange for some reason. Who knows? But we used to have a squirrel watching club. We used to have a watchers of a squirrel watching club. So students used to take time out of the day and watch other students watch squirrels. Now, that's up to the student that really want to participate and do something like that. Again, it's a part of the social education. So if you want to watch other students watch squirrels, that's a great way to be a part of that. But that's just one of over, I want to say, about 1,000 student organizations on campus. So students can find their path in a variety of different ways. And we might be in central Illinois, away from a lot of the big cities, but you can find your path at Illinois.
I'm really glad you brought general studies up, and I actually want to come back to that a little bit later when we get into more of the admission questions. Definitely you want to circle back there. And just so you know, if you start flexing those U of I muscles too much, I'm going to smack you down because I'm a Michigan State alum. So,
oh, here we go.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a little Spartan pride over here that might trickle out. But and Lisa gets a whack. So Lisa's U Chicago Northwestern.
Yeah, I'm not even in the fight. I'm just not even. University of Chicago school spirit doesn't exist. So
yeah, but she did a post grad at Michigan. So
I did, but it didn't take. It didn't take.
Guess what? She never went to a football game. She said the mall was wide open when the games were on. She had free access to the mall.
Grocery stores were fabulous. It was great. Football games.
You trying to tell me you didn't go to the iconic Michigan Stadium? I mean, as a Midwest football player, going to the stadium
I went to it, but
awesome.
Just not to watch football. That's all. I just didn't watch football there. I was inside it. I was there for other reasons, but not for football. So
that doesn't count.
I don't know if that counts. I don't know. I don't know about that one.
All right. So let's circle back. You mentioned a lot about programs. I want to mention some other programs that I think of as some of the strongest at U of I, and you can just say, take 60 to 90 seconds and say whatever you want to say. So the first thing to me that comes to mind is computer science, because it's darn near impossible to get anybody in. So tell me what you can say about, like, why is everybody beating the doors down to get into your school for comp sci?
Well, I will say probably the starting salary for people that graduate from computer science. It is pretty high. They will get a lot of expert guidance when it comes to professors there. I talked about experiential learning for our programs in general, but definitely with computer science. One thing that I guess people don't know about computer science is the aspect of teamwork. That is very, very important. You might be sitting in an area where you're learning a lot about code or you're doing certain projects, but when you're done with your project, you're working on another one with another teammate. And even though you might be thinking you're going to be sitting doing something, I guess, alone, you are part of a whole. I talked about a cog in a wheel. Computer science is a lot about plugging a lot of cogs in a big wheel. And the teamwork aspect of computer science is important. So students that are interested in anything when it comes to coding or programming and learning about the software component, that teamwork is a huge aspect of it. So there's no way they can't go anywhere without working in a team environment. And that's usually where students might kind of miss the boat when it comes to computer science. Even as students are applying, hopefully they had experience working in teams, because that's pretty much all you do once you're a student at Illinois.
That's great. We'll probably come back to that in admissions as well and get back to the admissions section.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, when applying for college, organization is one of the toughest hurdles to get over. There's so many things to keep track of, with documents and essays and worksheets and transcripts and dues and so much more. Now, a few months ago, I shared an excellent organization tool called Todoist. And now I'm recommending another great app, and it's our recommended resource for episode 289. It's an organizational tool, an app called InClass. Now, this app is specifically designed to keep you and help you stay more organized and efficient. If you have a Gmail, which almost all of us do, you're most likely familiar with Google Drive. But maybe you haven't been using the application to its fullest potential. The app will allow applicants to access all of their files via mobile device. So instead of having to lug around your laptop, or worse yet, your desktop, when you need to access your spreadsheets, PDF files, Word docs, photos, you can create new folders when you need them. And it's a great app for students and parents. It's called InClass. We'll now return to my interview with Brian Hodges, the Senior Associate Director of the University of Illinois-Urbana-Champaign. And I know earlier you mentioned something else that comes to mind when I think of UIUC, which is the Gies School of Business. I know both accounting and finance are some of the stronger programs in there. Talk about either accounting, finance, or anything else you want to share about why the Gies School of Business is one of your strongest offerings.
Well, I think one of the big things about Gies, especially when students apply, they apply generally to business undeclared.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're admitted, that first year they kind of work with their advisor to kind of figure out what path in business you want to go. All students are taking kind of the same core courses, and then you might veer off into accountancy and finance or supply chain management or entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
And all have the kind of beginning stages of that. I know accountancy and finance are well known.
Mm-hmm.
They do good, have a good job placement rates. They do have good starting salaries. Accountancy is it's a great resource for students because we actually have a graduate program where students can complete in 1 year, have 5 years, get their master's degree, and be able to sit for the CPA, the Certified Public Accountancy exam. And we do have a pretty good high pass rate for students that do accountancy. Finance, a lot of students are thinking about Wall Street, thinking about how do they learn about the stock market so they can individually make money or maybe help people make money in the finance realm. But all of those usually start in the first year, kind of learning what business in general is about. A lot of students that we're finding, they know they speak about business generally, but they don't know exactly what that means. And that's why in Gies, the students, if they're admitted, they start their first year more of a general background of what business is like. And then they have a conversation about what the next steps are after that first year in business. But accounting and finance are great programs, but there's a lot more that goes into business. I talk about supply chain management, management in general, business administration, information systems. Those all are business programs. And I talk about other business programs. About half our business programs are not even in the Gies College of Business. Some are in our agriculture, consumer, and environmental science college. Some are in College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. All of them kind of have a different aspect of business, but they also have a business background as well.
Great. And what can you tell me about economics and architecture? Because I know those are also signature programs.
Economics, it's in our College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and it definitely does more focus on the behavior behind certain individuals or even systems and how they help with the economy as far as what goods, good or bad, to purchase. Economics is kind of split up into two different areas. Microeconomics, more on the individual and firms. Macroeconomics is more pretty much on the broader scale as far as gross domestic product or national product, or how those goods and services help the world or country or world economy. That program is probably just as competitive as the Gies College of Business to get in. And it's usually students think that program is actually in the Gies College of Business. And it's in liberal arts and sciences. Architecture, students that want to definitely build buildings or have even the psychology behind buildings and how they look. That is a very interesting major for students. Math is an important part of architecture. We call it architectural studies, and the math building blocks are very important for students that are interested in applying to that program, because that's what we're going to be doing. And hopefully they're building our buildings. They know about math, so we have sturdy and very, very safe buildings being built.
And I'm going to ask you now about engineering, because I think of engineering as being right up there as the top of your programs. I know Lisa's husband, Alan, has an engineering. Did you say chemical? Was her?
Chemical. Yeah, but he's an actuary now, so he doesn't do anything with chemicals at all. So
well, that's what we tell people. So many times people go in a different direction than a degree, but I know there's a number of degrees, another number of different disciplines within engineering where you guys are way up there and highly reputable. And I once had I won't call him a friend, but an associate. It was more of our kids were friends, and he got his PhD from MIT, and he did his undergrad in engineering. And he got his undergrad at your school, and he felt he was better prepared for the PhD at MIT than the people that had gone to MIT and some of the other similar schools for undergrad. So I've been sold on your engineering ever since that anecdote. So what can you tell me about, I'll just leave it wide open, and about engineering, because I know there's a lot of different strengths there.
Well, the Grainger College of Engineering, they do prepare students in a variety of the engineering programs. The ones off the top of my head, we talked about computer science. Computer engineering is more about hardware and software. Electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, bioengineering. Those are probably all of our top tiered programs, and they're tiered more along the line of being competitive. For students that are interested in those programs, they tend to want students that have really high grades in math and science and high grades overall, but they do prepare those students for the next step. One thing I will talk about will be some of our programs that are lesser known. One is our system engineering program, which kind of combines both computer science and just general engineering, and students kind of go in a variety of different ways. Material science and design is another program that is still competitive, but it's not as competitive as some of those other programs. But again, it does prepare students for the next step, and it kind of pulls in a variety of different places from computer engineering to mechanical engineering. Civil engineering, which is actually ranked pretty high as far as one of our top programs, is not as competitive as mechanical, electrical, or even computer engineering. It's a program that is especially for students that might be interested in architecture or in construction. That's definitely an option for them, but it's not as competitive as some of our well-known programs. Grainger is probably about 15 different programs within engineering. There's some outside of engineering, or agriculture and bioengineering program. Chemical engineering is actually in our College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, but they all will work with advisors from the Grainger College of Engineering to, again, prepare them for that next step. So engineering itself, you really can't go wrong on the options that we do have, but it is competitive. It's not all the programs are extremely competitive.
And two programs I want to ask you about that are very different is one, communication and mass media, and then also cell and molecular biology, or really natural sciences. What do you want to say about any of those programs? Because I know those also have great reputations.
Yeah, communication program actually in liberal arts and sciences, and it's more about how do individuals communicate with each other. It's not necessarily advertising or marketing. Actually, have a media and cinema studies. It's actually in our College of Media, it has a different realm. So it's more about how individuals communicate with each other, and marketing kind of falls into that. Advertising falls into that. Media kind of falls in that communication realm. So it's a way for students, especially if they're interested in theory and how individuals communicate with each other. And it's kind of a building blocks on marketing, which is in our Gies College of Business. Advertising, which is in College of Media. Advertising is more about how those different aspects of words or pictures, the theory behind why an individual is making a decision. Media kind of incorporates social media and, again, advertising and marketing. So it's interesting of all the different programs that we do offer, how they all kind of are interconnected. And one way that we try to showcase that is actually through our what we call Program Explorer. For all our different programs, we kind of have a breakdown for each individual program. And then towards the bottom of the page, we have what we call related programs. So you'll see the connections between these other programs. And it helps students kind of find out that, yeah, this program I'm really interested in, but I might be more interested in this. And communication, you can see marketing, you can see advertising, you can see media as other related programs that might not be specifically what they're thinking about, but it might be something that might catch their eye once they're a current student on campus. So I'm glad you brought up communication and media, because they're actually separate but connected, if that makes sense.
No, that's great. Friends, this concludes the first part of our 3-part interview. I hope you'll join us next week for part 2 of 3.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
Friends, I'm really excited. Because of your feedback, we're bringing back the old traditional college spotlights at least for 9 weeks in a row. So I'm going to be sharing feedback for the next 9 consecutive weeks on my trip to California, school by school, and the order I visited the schools. And I'm blessed to be joined by Linda Depker today. Hi, Linda.
Good morning, Mark.
Yeah, Linda's going to join me for this 9-part series. And it's great because, for one, she's more of a techie than me. I don't know if you realize that, Linda, but you are more than a techie than me. Her daughter is quite the impressive computer science student. So when we get talking tech, she's way over my head, and we're going to be talking tech today. So I feel like I've got a good partner for this one.
You have set the bar high now, Mark, so I'll do my best.
Oh, no, not a problem. So what I'm going to do with these, I literally have hours of recordings and I've translated them to notes, and I'm going to go through and share with you a lot of different things, because what happens when we go to these visits is we have faculty panels, we have student panels, we have tours, we have admissions panels, and I'm just going to share pretty much anything that I really think would be of interest to you. And if you really listen carefully, you'll be able to hear what I feel are the strengths for the school and what are the areas for improvement. And then at the very end, I'm going to tell you the student that I would recommend to each of these schools as a college counselor. So that's kind of where we're going here. And the first session we started out with was a breakfast with Ashley Pally, who I think is fantastic. Their admission director, who, by the way, has agreed to come on our podcast. So I'm going to talk a lot about Caltech. So we'll either do advanced Caltech or we'll do something else. But anyway, so one thing about Ashley is she is as straightforward and honest and transparent as any admission officer you will ever hear. She does not hide things that some people might consider to be difficulties or flaws. She just tells it straight. And I'm going to be sharing it that way with you as well. So she points out that Caltech is often compared to MIT, but it's actually very different. And one of the biggest differences is that Caltech's entire school, undergraduate school, 920 students, is really small. Caltech has 920 students for undergrad. That is really, really small. I mean, a lot of people go to high schools 2, 3, 4 times that size. And one entire class at MIT, meaning like the freshman class, is bigger than the entire school of undergraduate school at Caltech. And even if we look at grad students, total school is 2,200. So it's a small school. But the level of personal individual attention, 3-to-1 class ratio. That's right, 3-to-1. And they do some very unique things. Faculty play a role in the decision-making process. They have 5 rounds in admissions. And faculty are involved every step of the way. And, Ashley, at first she's like, her background is Scripps and Pomona, where she'd worked at before. And I'm coming to this place. Why are faculty having all this role? But then when you start reading, you see the technical knowledge of the students, you realize we need faculty. And one example she gives of the personal attention is there's a student who had written 300 pages in 2 different physics books on physics. And one of the faculty members, who's a Nobel Prize winner, read all 300 pages of his books for one student and said, this kid is really special. We need to admit him. That is like unbelievable, because most people are like, whatever you send me, I need to be able to read it in 10 to 12 minutes, if not 8, not reading 300 pages. Caltech will let you know we are unapologetically STEM. We are deeply, unapologetically committed to STEM. You need to know that. And this is another thing. This is a little bit of a paraphrase, but I'm comfortable doing it because this is Ashley's version of it. So if she'll do it, I'll do it, for their mission. And it's going to be like nothing you've heard before. Our mission is take the best and the brightest STEM students in the world, break them down, and build them back into being the best students in the world. Ashley will say, we are not meant for most students. It requires a certain kind of student who's willing to go through that arduous process. Another quote from Ashley, we have a core that is brutal. You may be the smartest person in your country, and you come in here and you struggle. But something they do that's great, the first 2 semesters are pass-fail, because most of the students, they say, no matter how brilliant you are probably going to be close to failing. And it can be a really hard thing for students. Everyone is, as he said this, where everyone is struggling all the time. But we're going to take the best and the brightest, and our job is to get them to Mars. We're hard, we're relentless, and it can be unkind. So, Linda, that's normally not what you hear from an admission person trying to sell you on their school, but brutal honesty, and there's a lot of positives. So, she said, place can be really, really rewarding for a lot of kids, because a lot of times at Caltech, they're attracting a kid that's been bored, the smartest kid probably in their school, as she said, oftentimes in the country, and they've never been challenged. And all of a sudden they find a community of people that are like him or her, and the lights just go off. They've been yearning for that their whole life, and it's just completely invigorating.
Yeah. I think that Caltech has got that kind of mythical standing for colleges. I mean, it just, even more so than MIT, it's just in a different level because I think it is so small. And Mark, I know that you don't watch TV, but
sometimes,
the Big Bang Theory probably, brought Caltech to light for a lot of students. And then when you take a look at it, you realize, whoa, this school is not like others. And just their core program. And I looked at their core curriculum. It's not like other schools. It is still very, very STEM related, and your basic core classes are going to take you through more math than other core curriculums. So you're right. It is a different beast.
Yeah, one of the things that was great, we had a faculty panel explicitly on core, and I'll share some of the things they said in a second. It was quite impressive. They absolutely have to have calc, chem, and physics. You have to have that before you get there. I remember a while ago, they've moved up this a little bit, but they were the only school in the country that required BC Calc. They're the only one. And, they occasionally will make exceptions there. It's not a hard, firm commitment like it once was, but you absolutely have to have calc, chem, and physics. And they're looking for high level STEM engagement. They want to see where STEM engagement, quote, explodes outside of the classroom. The kid that loves to read the textbook for fun. That's an all-consuming passion. Another thing they look for is, with this STEM student engagement, what would it be like if we gave them unlimited resources? What could this kid do? They look a lot at the resources that you've had for your school, and they ask themselves, if we gave this kid unlimited resources, what could they accomplish? Now, a couple quick policy updates, pretty significant. They did move to single choice early action, sometimes called restrictive early action, this year. Now only one of 5 schools in the country to offer that, joining Harvard, Yale, Stanford, and Princeton. And they did that mostly, they said, because when they have 5 rounds of reading, faculty reading, their applications had gone from 8,000 to 17,000. And they had the lowest admit rate in the country, 2.7%. And they said, we did not like it. We did not celebrate it. And we know that our admit rate will actually get higher because if people have to only pick one early action school, and with single choice early action, you can apply to oftentimes your state's public school if it's early action, but you can't apply to any early decision or any other early action program. So you're not going to have as many early action apps. So they said, yeah, our applications dropped from 5,100 when we had unrestricted early action like MIT has to 1,700 this year. And we love that 68% decrease. And we were celebrating it. And our admit rate will probably go to 7% from 2.7, and we'll be happy with that. So they've really made a huge increase more recently to under-resourced students. They were bringing in 6 QuestBridge students that all have a 0 EFC, and they moved from 6 to 35. So a huge increase there. Another big new development, they have a testing moratorium on until 2025, meaning test blind, test free, score free, use your term. And so far, their results are that test non-submitters and test submitters are looking very similar in terms of things like GPA, so far, very early, but attrition, things like that. So they feel so overwhelming success so far. They have 25 faculty members who read these files, and they sit in, they review, they do everything in the admission process. It's a place for discovery, and they pride themselves on that. And one of the programs they pride themselves on is CAEL, K-A-E-L, Career Advising Experiential Learning, essay writing, career fairs, interviews. 45% of students go on to grad school, professional school, 47% straight into industry, 5% fellowships or internships, and 3% other professional endeavors. Starting salary for Caltech grad in 2020, $110,000. Average starting salary, $56,000. So pretty much double the national average. So that was the initial breakfast, and not just asked, the other admissions people came up and spoke. Then the tour. We had a fantastic tour guide. Here's some highlights from the tour. You can use the free pass to access the LA transportation system. Caltech is in Pasadena, and that pass goes from Santa Monica to Azusa. All buses, all trains, free access. This is really important. The house systems. They have 8 undergraduate houses, Hogwarts style. Each has their own tradition, culture, put on events. The northern houses are doubles. The southern houses could be singles, doubles, or triples. And the houses, they put on events, dinners, activities for first-year students. And students pick their houses through a program called rotation where they rank their houses. And then there's an algorithm. Of course, it's Caltech. There's an algorithm that picks the house for you, but it isn't binding. You can opt out. And you actually don't have to live in one of the 8 houses. There is an option for people to be in 3 additional options for housing other than the houses, but it's highly recommended that you pick one of the houses because that's your social network, that's your support network, that's the glue. They all have different personalities and they do different things. They say you can look at the activities and you can tell the personalities. Like one of the houses, you do laser tag from midnight to 4 a.m. Another house, Fleming House, they've rented out the Rose Bowl every year since the 60s at a great rate. Another house does karaoke all the time, so you can kind of see the houses by their personalities. And you can also have a social membership, meaning you're not in a house, but you like this house and you participate in them because of their activities. And you can go on events like ski trips and things, even if you're not in a house. But once again, they have these 3 unaffiliated residences, but the houses are the glue. That's what creates the community. And not only the social community, but a lot of your academic help. The houses are mixed by gender, race, major, and age, and you can stay for all 4 years. Housing is guaranteed for the first 2 years. You have to live on campus for the first 2 years, and housing is, available really for all 4 years. Each house has its own RA, grad students that are there. They also have peer mentors that are undergrads, and they have a health advocate. This is usually somebody going into the medical field that's had a year long of training just to help if you have some health needs. It's a beautiful campus. It's typical California. Architecture is beautiful. And they have all these walks like the Olive Walk and the Orange Walk. And yep, you can grab orange trees on the Orange Walk. You sure can. Now, there is a degree of academic intensity. This is all stuff that came up on the tour. A lot of questions came up. Most people feel like it is harder than they expected it to be, but they also feel like the level of social and emotional support exceeded anything they could have imagined. And the faculty support also exceeds expectations. I asked, does the mission break people down? And the response I got is the mission changes the way you think, but it just makes you come back as a better, stronger person. Now, multiple students said that your first quarter, if you thought you were great at like AP, Calc BC, when you get into class, you're going to hardly feel like you knew anything because everything's proof-based. So it's a different approach to learning. You're probably familiar with that. Are you a little bit, Linda, proof-based?
Not personally, but I have been hearing from my daughter the trials and tribulations of proof-based coursework over the past semester.
Yeah, and friends, for those you don't know, Linda's daughter is a freshman at the University of Chicago, so she just finished her first semester. And in a few episodes from now, she's going to share some insights that she's learned from everything from the time she got the acceptance all the way through that first semester. And so you'll hear Linda and Lisa are going to do that segment. I think you'll find that real helpful. So they also said some other things that I thought were noteworthy. They said very few people leave because it's too hard. Very few people leave. They say that's why you come here. And one thing that helps so much, and everybody talked about this, is that the first 2 quarters are pass-fail. Because the first 2 quarters you come in and you're overwhelmed. But you're learning where the academic resources are, the social connections, the support system in your house and the faculty. And by the time you get to the 3rd semester, you're ready for grades. Now, surprisingly, for a place with a 3-to-1 ratio, some classes are large. So some classes have almost the entire freshman class in them, which is 230. And those are some of your intro classes like chem and physics and math. But they'll have 20 to 30 TAs there that are there to break up into smaller sections. And then when you get in your major classes, they're relatively big but a little smaller. Then when you get into your advanced classes, well, our tour guide said she had a class with 4 students, a professor, and 2 TAs. So literally, they're really small on the advanced level. I asked, talk to me about the student who does well here. And a tour guide said, you have to be interested in science and STEM. You have to be curious. You have to be humble. The kid that thinks they know everything doesn't do well here. You have to be the kid willing to ask for help. You have to be the person to seek out the resources that are here. And she said it's a very supportive and collaborative community. I asked her, do people get imposter syndrome here? She said yes, but not as much as you'd think because the community is so close and everyone's here to support you. She said, sometimes I might feel like the stupidest kid in my class, but everyone's so close that you just feel more like you're part of a supportive community. Professors get mixed reviews. They're great at research, but teaching, very mixed reviews. Question, what would students change? The relationship with the administration. Students don't always feel listened to. For example, we had a big winter gala this weekend. We paid all this money for my dress. There was a COVID outbreak in one house, so the admin canceled everything for everybody. I just wish they'd be more compromising. I asked, what departments do you think are particularly strong? Chemistry and physics. Now, very noteworthy, 95% of students do research. Many start in their freshman year. It's most commonly done over the summer through a very fantastic program called SURF, which is an acronym for Summer Undergrad Research Fellowship. What happens here is for 10 weeks, you get hands-on experience, academic labs, and students are really doing work. They're the ones writing the code, running the reactions, growing the bacterial cultures. You know, you pick a lab, you pick a project, you work with a faculty member, and these can be all over the country or even all over the world. And the nice thing is you get $7,000 paid for you to do SURF. So now if you live on campus, they take some of that back for room and board, but you can live anywhere. And you can do multiple SURF. Some people surf like 3 or 4 different summers, but it's most commonly done freshman year, sophomore year. There's some military research on campus. It's co-managed with JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is managed by the government since World War II. Of course, many people have heard of the Manhattan Project. That was done here back in the day. And if you want to get published, you can reach out to your professors and say, I want to get published. And usually they will help get you on a project that will get you published. You got Nobel laureate professors, and the opportunity to do research with them is a major reason why this tour guide said I came to Caltech. So I'm just going to take a stop for a second, Linda, because I've been blathering on and see if anything jumps at you.
Well, you know, it's such a special place, and I get the feeling that a lot of students probably self-select going to Caltech. It's so STEM focused that you're not going to get somebody who's, oh, I'd like to minor in history or something like that going there. I like hearing how supportive they are, because that is a pressure cooker kind of place. Because if I'm remembering correctly, they're on trimester. So like 10-week trimesters.
Correct. Every 10 weeks they rotate. So it's humming fast.
Yeah, it's fast. And that can be tough. Now, as a parent, you know, I love Pasadena.
Sure.
And I
Who
like
doesn't?
hearing that that they have housing available for all 4 years. And the house system is, I just can't say enough about that house system where students come in and have that kind of built-in social network right away. I think that's really important. Because do they have Greek life on campus there?
No, there is no Greek life. The house system is Caltech's version of Greek life. So that's a substitute for them for Greek life. That's good. So let's talk about the faculty panel, because we had a faculty panel with the core curriculums, on the core curriculum. So for the core, students have to take 3 terms of math, 3 terms of physics, 2 terms of chemistry. Now this will surprise people. 12 terms of humanities and social sciences, 3 terms of PE, 1 term of biology, 1 freshman menu course, and 1 course on scientific writing. And when the question came up, why core? And the answer was because we're training people to be citizens of the world. This is our philosophy. The leaders in the world in science have to become more interdisciplinary than ever before. Everyone has to learn math 1A. No one is prepared without going through that. And it's how mathematicians think. And calc is the foundation for all of this. And if anyone doesn't have calc, they are going to be years behind. They also said that It's not for everybody. You have to really be dedicated to science or engineering or something along these lines. But it's the core that makes Caltech special. Their undergraduate students that come through, they are, by sophomore year, they are more advanced than grad students that they bring in. And they bring in the brightest grad students from the world. But their sophomore undergrads are better prepared, and they attribute that to core. Most recent class, there were 10 bioengineering grads. 4 of the 10 went to MIT, another one went to Princeton. The faculty member talking with it, he followed up with all 5, and he said they're light years ahead of all of their classmates at MIT and Princeton because of core. So they believe in core to the core. And the reason I believe in these 12 required humanities and social science courses, they said, is because their goal is to produce grads that are more sympathetic, more aware, people that are going to have a lot of power in the world. And this is a quote, Linda, we don't want Elon Musk, is what the faculty member said. we don't want Elon Musk. We want critical thinkers who can respond to nuance, who can explain complex ideas, who can explain their research, who are good verbal and written communicators. And they call that whole thing HSS, Humanities, Social Sciences. What's involved in that? Well, they offer English, history, history of science, philosophy, visual culture, art history, film, lots of foreign languages, and then classes on gender, race, ethnicity. Huge emphasis on interdisciplinary education. And, for example, they'll have an MRI machine and a social science department all together. Study the brain and then go do social science. Social science is focused a lot on quantitative methods, a lot of economics, business, poli-sci, more limited offerings in psychology and anthropology. A lot of seminar-style courses that do require a lot of research. Then your point, Linda, they brought it up. Very fast moving. Students need to hit the ground running, very strong reading and writing skills. You will fail your freshman humanities class if you are the biggest math genius, but you are not strong in reading or writing. One of the unique aspects of Caltech, of course, is surf. And students are really intimidated by it at first because they think they're just going to get a problem set. But they're expected to come up with their own ideas, to do experiments that no one has ever done before. And they also said something interesting. On the grad school admissions, they have never accepted a student in years that did not come in with significant research experience. They said there's no substitute for practicing your craft. And if you're going to do research the rest of your life, you better find out now if you like it. And you could do humanities research, too. A lot of times they said that's helping a professor write their books. They have 20 faculty who are freshman advisors, and you meet with them at least quarterly. You have another person that helps you with study abroad. There's a balance between the nuts and bolts of the curriculum and big picture stuff. And they try to match you with somebody in your area of interest. And then you also get a research advisor that helps you as well. Study abroad is not as popular here as some schools, but they do have some partnerships with Cambridge, University College of London, Edinburgh, Copenhagen, University of Melbourne, but not a super high percentage of people compared to some schools like one next week, Oxy, to go abroad. I had a conversation after with a faculty member about this place, and she's like, listen, I went to Harvard, and this place is way more intense than Harvard. Let me tell you that. And she said, I sit on a faculty admissions committee. I look for genuine intellectual curiosity. Are they excited about problem solving? Are they excited about how the world works? Are they asking questions? And she said, it makes me very anxious when I get a recommendation from a teacher or a counselor, and it says that the student is just sort of maybe in that middle category for how they respond to setbacks. They're only here for 10 weeks. They have to have resiliency and grit, and they have to have very high level writing. We do not have much in the way of remedial writing. If you're not able to write well at the AP writing level, then this probably won't be the place for you. Now, student panel. So the students were really honest. They talked about a lot of things. They told their reasons why they came to Caltech. One said, I came because they're really into research here. Another said, I love the house system. Another said, I love the close-knit, tight community. Another said, I found kids I could finally relate to after being a long-time self-proclaimed nerd. Another said, I like the way they support each other. Another said, I like the beautiful campus. Another one said, I like how welcoming everybody was and how they made me feel. Another one said, I came because of core. Another one said, you come here knowing it's going to be really hard and that is going to be important for your growth. You don't come here unless you want to embrace the struggle. Caltech has taught me I can do things I never thought I would ever be able to do. Another one says, you don't come here expecting it to be easy. You know it's going to be very rigorous and challenging. And and you're going to say to yourself, why am I here a lot of times? What am I doing? I'm completely failing. But the bar is so high here. A lot of kids struggle here. And they are used to being the super high achiever in their high school. And that is not going to be the case here. And it takes them a while to adjust. But it's all really supportive here. I'm a computer science student, and the other computer science students go to the way to help each other. I came from a high school that was super competitive, and I was sick of it. This prepares you for the real life because it focuses on teamwork and collaboration. I compare what I'm doing to my past students at my old high school and what they're experiencing, and I think it's much better how I'm being prepared. Question was asked to all the students on the panel: what is one thing Caltech can do better? We don't have a culture of showing up for sporting events because we have so much work to do. I wish they would hire teachers that were better at teaching and not research and could explain it better. A lot of times I have to teach myself the concepts. Another student complained that administrators don't understand the house system and they're not supportive of our ideas. In a small school, you know exactly who those people are, and you see them all the time. So, Linda, any thoughts? I'm going to share one more section, which is who I think Caltech is good for as a college coach. Do you want to share your thoughts now, or do you want me to share my thoughts on that, and then you have a few thoughts and chime in? It's up to you.
Yeah, why don't you continue on, and I'll share my thoughts afterwards, after I hear everything.
All right. So for the right kid, this place can be really exciting. And who do I think that right kid is? A kid who is inordinately smart, often bored with how easy school has been. A student that wants to be in a small school. A student that wants to be in a community. These are the people I would refer to Caltech. Student that wants to be in close relationships. I'm going to share a conversation I had at NACAC. So when I was at NACAC this year in September in Houston, I talked for an hour with a young man who had just left 5 years in Caltech's admission office to take a position with the coalition. So I had to pick his brain, about Caltech. And the first thing he said was, everybody thinks Caltech is most like MIT. No, the two schools it's most like are Olin and Harvey Mudd. And you got to be willing to embrace struggle. You got to almost believe in that adage, what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. If you're not somebody who's pretty strong mentally, Caltech would be challenging if it would be a place to admit you, because they are going to take you to a place that you never thought you could go and attempt to make you stronger. As they say, we're trying to take you to Mars. And so we're trying to do that. I would recommend students who embrace the house system. I would recommend students that are passionate about science, technology, engineering, and math. The kids, this was a quote actually from one of the faculty panels. You can spot a Caltech kid away. When I go speak at a place, it's the kid that comes up to me afterward. They want to talk to me about the concepts that I explained. Students who want a well-rounded education because of core. Core doesn't give you as much flexibility as some schools in your curriculum, but it prepares you with a fantastic foundation. Students who are excited about surf. Surf's a very big part at Caltech, especially freshman and sophomore years. Students who are either a little quirky or who are comfortable around quirky students. So there's a counselor that I know in the greater Atlanta area. She's very experienced. She's been college counselor for quite some time. She recently actually retired, but she still does a little work on the side, helping kids out. And we actually were together for a day, and I got a chance to talk to her a lot. And I'm bringing her up because her son went to Caltech and had a fantastic experience. And she made a statement, and she said, Caltech is a fantastic place. My son wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, but I think everybody there is somewhat on the spectrum. Now, I asked Ashley if that was true, and she said, I wouldn't say everybody, but I understand where she's coming from. There are a lot of quirky kids that can be, a little unique and focused. And that's fantastic if that's who you are, or you at least need to be comfortable with that. Students that love doing research. Caltech is all about research. Students who are okay working with TAs, because there's a lot more TAs than you would think for a school this small. Students who don't need a large critical mass of people from their demographic group. Like, if you're Black, you're not going to have that many people like you. If you're Latino or Hispanic, or you're a kid from Minnesota, it's just a small environment. And so you have to be comfortable with not having a large critical mass of people from your demographic. pretty large gender balance right now, pretty large women community, but not in the professor ranks. You got to be comfortable with that. It's more very male dominated in the professors. Students who want to shoot for the moon.
Literally.
Yeah, who want to shoot for the moon, literally. And just a couple more thoughts I have here. Students with a really strong foundation, because students would say over and over, I came in with BC Calc, AP Chem, AP Physics, and I was way behind because others had linear and multivariable, and they were way beyond me. I was getting mixed feedback on Caltech, Linda, because sometimes I would talk to a student and they would say they love the rigor. It took them to a whole new place they never thought they could go. And then another conversation with a faculty member from 16 years, they said, just be really careful who you send here because I've seen this place break people. I really mean it. We're not for everybody. This place is tough. And I would be like, well, isn't that true for all the most selective schools, the Stanfords? No, this is place, trust me, I've been there for 16 years. So I was getting really mixed reviews. And Brennan, Barnard, and I were talking to Ashley Pally at the end about this together. And we were both saying, listen, we're trying to get our finger on the pulse of this place. Does it break people down? And we need to be worried about sending people here because it's not healthy mentally. Or do you guys just know what you're doing because you have such incredible supports and you pick such right people in admissions and you admit the people, they don't have a very high attrition rate. It's very low. And then Brennan said something. He said, I almost feel like this place is like the Navy SEALs training. And then Ashley said, "That's
Mark, I was just going to say the same thing. Yes, it sounds like boot camp, like going to Ranger school or something like that."
Well, Ashley said that's exactly it. The Naval SEALs training. So that's the metaphor that I have. And I close with that and see what your thoughts are, Linda.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it sounds like. Caltech to me, and I said it earlier, it just has this kind of mythical presence, at least in my mind, that's where the really smart kids go. And not just who are smart, but who have a passion for STEM and for research. I mean, when you're talking about, you could actually do research at JPL, which is rocket science. It really is rocket science. That's just incredible opportunities. But I do like hearing the students say that it's collaborative and it's not, that kind of cutthroat competitive environment, because I think that is can be really taxing. And it sounds like Caltech, like most schools, have recognized the mental health needs of students and are stepping up. And I do think, that students come back. That's a good sign. It's tough, but they're getting the support that they need. So I like to hear that.
And I agree, Linda. I came in with this mythical view of Caltech. So on this 9 schools that we visited, there's some I've been to 4 times, about 4 or 5 of them I've been to 4 times, and a couple I've been to twice, and there are 2 I had not been to at all, and this was one of the 2. This is one of the reasons why I was excited about the trip, because I hadn't been to Caltech and hadn't been to University of Redlands, which we'll get to in, about a month or so. But I came in with the same mythical view of it, just like out-of-the-world brainiacs, STEM-focused, quirky, intellectual. A couple of my takeaways that were things that surprised me was the level of support. And to your point, everybody said it's collaborative here. It's completely taboo to talk about your grades, and it's so, it's so unacceptable socially that nobody even goes there. It's just not the culture. We don't do that. So it's very collaborative. And the supports are really there. And, I mean, sure, there's a lot of kids that are eccentric, but there are also kids that are just normal kids. They're just brainiacs in STEM that are really into it. And so my experience was I came away very positive, with a very, very positive view, because there is that kid that is bored in a lot of other places. And when they can get around kids like this, it's like heaven on earth to them.
Like coming home when they find their people. And you're right. It's such a special group of kids that are probably in that incoming class. And I love hearing that they take the time on the admissions side to make sure they've got the right kids. I love that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me, Linda. This was great. I look forward to next week where we talk about Occidental College, and we'll see you for that one.
See you then.
Friends, on Monday's episode, I'll continue to talk about some of the big issues for the entire year, some of the hot topics for the entire year in higher ed, as well as look ahead to what look like they're going to be the hot topics for 2023. And we start a whole new interview that I'm really excited about. It's with Hillary Dickman, who's become a friend for me. She is an admission officer, assistant director of admission, actually, at Colorado College. And we're going to bounce around and cover 3 completely different topics over the next 3 weeks. On Monday's episode, we'll start out talking about early decision 1 versus early decision 2. And then the following week, we'll talk about sort of an idea that we think will help families to get a realistic sense of their chances of admission at very selective schools. And then we'll talk about something we really need to talk about more on this podcast, which is FERPA. What is FERPA and how does it relate to college life and college admissions? So we hope you'll join us for that on Monday. And friends, remember, college is not a prize to be won. It is a match to be made. See you on Monday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 14. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel, and to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stelianos Dimitriou. If you want to have a coaching session with Lisa or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Thursday.